Dzień dobry.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I have the pleasure of welcoming you who are with us today at the Warsaw Stock Exchange and also all our webcast viewers who are watching us live on the internet at the conference devoted to the publication of the financial results of Grupa Azoty Group in the third quarter of 2017. Today's speakers include Mr. Wojciech Wardacki, President of the Management Board of Grupa Azoty S.A. and President of the Management Board of Grupa Azoty Police, Mr. Paweł Łapiński, Vice President of the Management Board of Grupa Azoty S.A., Mrs. Izabela Świderek, Vice President of the Management Board of Grupa Azoty Puławy, Mr. Włodzimierz Zasadzki, Vice President of the Management Board of Grupa Azoty Police, and Mr. Paweł Mortas, President of the Management Board of Grupa Azoty Kędzierzyn. Let me now give the floor over to Mr. Wojciech Wardacki. Thank you very much. Welcome, all of you, to another meeting with us. Today we're summarizing the third quarter of 2017. I will try to put all the information in a nutshell, unlike during the press conference, because I took you a lot of time to discuss our performance in detail. To start with, the third quarter has always been traditionally a difficult and challenging quarter across the Grupa Azoty Group from the perspective of the structure of our revenues and the types of our products. The third quarter has always been a major challenge. This year is an exceptional year, also because in our core business, namely fertilizers, we are observing an economic decline. This does not concern us only, but also all our major players of that market who have already published their performance, and you can see clearly where the problems lie. Despite all the circumstances, the measures that we have taken, and the performance that we are about to share with us make us proud, because in the year of our 19th anniversary, our performance in the third quarter of this year is a record-breaking performance. We have never reported such good performance in the third quarter across the group. The major events which we need to discuss at that point, which took place in the third quarter, namely the delivery of our investment plan, which we have already discussed with us during our last conference and also the recent press conference 3 months ago. There were certain concerns whether our capex can be delivered, whether our capex is under no threat. The third quarter clearly shows that we have delivered what we had promised. In September, we commissioned polyamide 2 plant at Tarnów, which is a major investment in the group, which is part of our strategy in the fertilizers segment, and it enables us to improve our margins and to ensure a different type of utilization of caprolactam from Puławy. This investment process has been very intensive, and I must say, I will dwell upon it in more detail, but I must say at this point that we have managed to catch up with our plan, and the delivery of our capex for 2013 is under no threat whatsoever. Another major area, and we have taken a lot of steps in order to make sure that we will deliver our strategy in terms of our major investment, is Polimery Police, which is a new name given to PDH Polska. This new name was given on the basis of our corporate decisions, which are aimed at extending our product chain and at creating a polypropylene plant. During those 3 months, we have contracted a lot of advisors and a lot of analytical work, and the company authorities have been involved to a large extent. As a management board, we want to involve both the management board members and all the authorities across the group, including the group's supervisory board. We want to involve each and every single person, each and every single member, in order for them to be aware of all the sensitive elements across the group. In relation to the decision-making process related to Polimery Police, the management board of Grupa Azoty Police invited to its meeting members of the group's supervisory board, members of the management board of PDH Polska, and members of the supervisory board of PDH Polska, and we have discussed with them all the individual elements in detail. They were also given a chance to have a walk-through of the plant to see all those sensitive areas with their own eyes. This will enable them and facilitate taking their decisions, and will also accelerate that decision-making process. We will implement that process as well in other group companies. We will visit Sierkopol at Grzybowo at the beginning of December. This is where certain problems need to be solved as well. This is where certain decisions, core decisions, need to be taken, which are of major importance for this plant, which is a major plant for the Kielce province. This will facilitate the decision-making process in relation to the polymer plant. We have been consistently diversifying our business. This is what we emphasized in our strategy, and we will see in just a second that we have achieved certain deliverables of that strategy, of the diversification process. We are optimizing our processes. On the one hand, it is possible because we are opening in new investments. We are bringing in on stream certain new investments which will improve the efficiency of that process. For instance, in the ammonia production process at Police, intensive work in Q3 also was related to reorganization in order to deliver the decisions, the major decisions of the group's council, namely the decision of the management boards of 4 key companies of the group. This decision was taken in early April this year. Those processes include the involvement of our employees, and as a result, we are consolidating all the area of agro-fertilizer distribution. This process has been implemented as planned because certain statements in the press cannot be considered problems by us. There are certain people who are spreading some false information on a disaster at Puławy, which is absolutely ungrounded. There are certain people who have been interviewed, who have been voicing certain concerns that we are losing profits, that we are taking certain unfair steps in the market. This is all not grounded, this is all false, and the management board has made a statement to that effect. Vice President of Puławy, Mr. Owczarski, is responsible for the work of that team, also in the area of logistics. In Q3, we have achieved a lot in terms of integration of our logistics processes within our own resources, and this process will be completed by the end of the year. And previously, it seemed impossible to deliver that process. However, we have managed to do it to the best interests and to the satisfaction of our social partners at Puławy, stakeholders at Puławy as well. There is a person from Puławy who is responsible for the staffing and reorganization of the entire logistics area. So the major role of Puławy is always appreciated in the group, and we have taken no steps in Q3 to undermine the development, the equal development of all our companies across the group, to make sure that we are consolidating the group to the best interest of the entire group and also all the group companies. In Q3, just as before, we put a lot of effort on research and development as well as innovation. This is not a newfangled fashion. This is a real need for the group. We have started the construction of the R&D center at Tarnów, which is going to be open in 2018. Mr. Kądzielawski is publishing a lot of pictures on their website, so you can see it for yourselves, what it looks like right now. We are planning to bring it on stream in 2018. In Q3, we recruited scientists and practitioners who will work in the R&D center to deliver success for the group. Today, we also signed a contract with the National Center, the contact points for the R&D programs of the European Union. We want to be a beneficiary of those programs, and we want to deliver that area in cooperation with the scientific centers. In Q3, we were also awarded with a lot of distinctions and awards. I do not want to prioritize them because I know for sure that Mr. Łapiński will protest because our opinions differ in that respect. I believe that the Ambassador of Poland in the world is the major award, but my colleagues have different opinions. What we need to remember that those awards go to show that our employees, the 15,000 of people who work with us and for us, for the group, are the people who are behind those awards and distinctions. And we are very happy to say that in the 19th anniversary year of the company, we are proud and satisfied to say that our performance is a record-breaking performance. We wanted to communicate this success to our employees. We wanted to have a celebration in order to reward our employees who have been working for the company and for the group for the past 30 and 40 years, because it was their success as well. So what were the factors that fueled our record-breaking performance in Q3 2017? Our main driver for high EBITDA profitability were plastics. Quarter to quarter, 2017 versus 2016, we saw a different structure of revenues. If you can see it on this slide. 60% were the revenues of the fertilizer segment. Q3 2016, it represented 55%. And in Q3 2017, it reached 50%. So which segments grew instead? The chemical segment grew from 27 to nearly 30%. The plastic segments, which I have already mentioned before, from 13 to 16%, and other activities grew as well. Our performance was also driven by historically high pigment prices I need to emphasize again that in the strategy, before its review, the pigments and the titanium white segment was supposed to be discontinued, was supposed to be liquidated, and its extinction was foreseen after several changes, quick changes, after recalling the management and entrusting certain responsibilities to certain employees with an extensive and long-term experience. This unit became more successful than ever, and right now it reports record-breaking performance. We actually need to turn down certain major players from the Polish market because we need to focus on our major global customers who have never left us in difficult times. Certain customers from Poland turned their back on us, and they turned to Ukraine in order to purchase their products from Ukraine. So we need to be loyal right now, and we need to consistently focus on our major foreign partners. Another driver of our performance were higher prices of urea, which translated immediately to the prices of our nitrate fertilizers. This is quite obvious when you look at the comparison with Q3 2016. There were certain elements and drivers which were beyond our control and which obviously influenced our financial performance, mainly the prices of gas, higher prices of gas, which went up to around 20%. We have discussed that issue time and again during our press conference. We are, on the one hand, very happy about the contracts with PGNiG, but on the other hand, we are very worried about gas prices. The explanation is quite simple. We always wanted to bring our prices together to the prices of our major competitors. Those differences were quite high before, quite large before. Right now, we are more or less on the same page. We do not have an influence on the global prices, irrespective of our sourcing locations. We still have a free pool which we can put in the market based on spot prices. We have done it in the past 3 months. There were certain experts that we have recruited as well, especially a very professional expert with extensive knowledge and a lot of authority in the gas area, Mrs. Mann. And we can already see the effects of those measures. The increase in gas prices has been traditionally a major problem to the big synthesis units and plants in the market, in a very challenging situation. Right now, this is one of important drivers. However, we now can have it under control and neutralize it in order to reduce its negative impact on our performance. I have mentioned the so-called cannibalism on the market. I have mentioned that these imports is not necessarily in line with all the regulations that we adhere to. And our calls and our measures are always focused on making sure that the law in Poland is adhered to and also enforced by law enforcement institutions. Grupa Azoty meets all those legal requirements. We are stacking our fertilizers to a certain height and in a certain manner. Certain fertilizers can be explosives, and there are certain regulations in that area, so we are very much in line with all the regulations in that respect. We are not afraid of the competition, but we are not afraid of the fair competition, the competitors who adhere to the law. This is all we ask for. This is what we demand. We have taken a lot of measures in order to neutralize unfair competition, but to a certain extent it is beyond our control. No distributor who has the turnover at the level of 1,006 million PLN and employs thousands of people, that distributor cannot have a reduction of its headcount. Therefore, certain distributors needed to turn to other sources in order to supply their raw materials, their production inputs. Especially, certain high prices were also certain negative drivers for our business, especially in terms of oxo alcohols and propylene. So we needed to extend our production chain to polypropylene. This will change our outlook in the market and it will reduce the risks for our major investments. I would like to now discuss in a nutshell our performance and performance highlights. Our revenue in quarter 3 2017 reached nearly 2,200 million PLN and exceeded 9 billion for the 9 months of the year. Our sales went up nearly 7% year-on-year, mainly on the back of our effective measures taken in the plastics and chemicals segment, especially pigments and to a certain extent oxo alcohols. Our EBITDA was historically high in quarter 3 2017 at 255 and at 969 for the 2 months of the year. The EBITDA margin in quarter 3 at 12% and at 14% for the 9 months of the year, and very good margins on sales supported by our production efficiency. Our net profit at 75 million for quarter 3 and 453 million for the 9 months of the year, and our net profit went up 26%. It goes to show that the measures we have taken at the operational level and also in terms of our financials were positive and fruitful. So what was our performance across the group for individual group companies for the 9 months of 2017, year-on-year? For Grupa Azoty S.A., the individual performance, our revenue were higher year-on-year by more than 100 million PLN. The EBITDA margin went up considerably from 54 to 205 at Tarnów. At Grupa Azoty Puławy, our revenue went up for the 9 months of the year. However, our EBITDA went down year-on-year, year-to-date versus the 9 months of 2016. At Police, we reported higher revenues for 9 months of the year, and our EBITDA was considerably higher, reaching record high levels at Police. At Kędzierzyn, after a couple of difficult months, especially the second month of the quarter, where we reported a lot of breakdowns, in quarter 3 there was improvement, and the revenue for the 9 months of the year went up by nearly 100 million PLN year-on-year, while EBITDA stayed nearly flat. So what was our performance in terms of quarter 3 2017 versus quarter 3 2016? At Grupa Azoty S.A., our individual revenue went up considerably to 208 million And let me pay special attention, let me draw your attention to EBITDA at Tarnów at 5 million PLN, including 16 million in quarter 3. At Grupa Azoty Puławy, revenue in quarter 3 went up by nearly 80 million PLN, and EBITDA went up slightly to 83 million PLN by 83 million PLN versus quarter 3 2016. At Police, revenue stayed more or less flat, but EBITDA went up by 11 million. At Kędzierzyn, you can see a clear improvement, and the negative effects observed in the previous period were not observed anymore in quarter 3, so you can see that EBITDA went up from 18 to 61 million PLN. In terms of our investments, just a couple of words before I will give the floor over to my colleagues. I want to discuss investments. In the 9 months of the year, we invested nearly 940 million PLN versus the planned capex at 1,300 million PLN. I believe I can say quite clearly and with all responsibility at that point that our assumptions in that and targets in this area will be delivered. Investments related to our growth accounted for 43%. 23% are the maintenance capex, more than 200 million in quarter 3. Throughout the year and also in the 9 months of the year, you can see quite clearly that we are trying to spread all investments uniformly across the group. In 2017 and also for the 9 months of the year, the main beneficiary, however, of our capex are Grupa Azoty, Zakłady Azotowe at Puławy. And it represented more than 40% of our capex. This is what we invested at Puławy, and also our investment plans for the years to come are mainly focused on Puławy. So, certain false information published or disseminated in the public opinion by the people who were not known by name are, let me stress it again, absolutely ungrounded. Nobody has taken any steps against Puławy. Our growth strategy is to combine all the functions and all the measures in order to leverage the effect of scale to the benefit of all the companies across the group, including Puławy, Police, Kędzierzyn and Tarnów, who are very important for their local communities. A major decision, the investment at Polimery Police, was taken by the special purpose vehicle in order to extend this investment task with a polypropylene information. The supervisory board will have taken their decisions. We are increasing our capital involvement. The group is taking up the shares at PDH Polska. We are consistently delivering our budget at €1,270 million net. The work is supposed to be finished by the end of 2009 and launched commercially in 2022. In quarter 3, this installation will take place in the Pomeranian Special Economic Zone. which will enable us to use the public aid of 428 million PLN. We are at the final stage of that process. We will diversify our revenues, we will have additional profits for the group, we will extend our product portfolio, and we will flatten the cyclic character of our business. And we're also considering compounding. We will also extend our seaports with our raw materials base and all the auxiliary infrastructure. This will be another major issue and another major decision for the group, because it will enable us to transport our raw materials through our seaport at Police, which is Poland's fourth biggest port. So in the recent days, we had an opportunity to test that route in order to see whether we can transport our raw materials from Kędzierzyn to Szczecin. Certain elements need to be improved. However, we know that it is possible. Thank you very much, and I will now give the floor over to Mr. Łapiński and my other colleagues to continue. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. The award that you have mentioned, in my opinion, the major award is our integrated report for 2016. From my point of view and from the perspective of our financials, I think that this award is the main award for the Grupa Azoty Group. This is our difference. This is something that we cannot agree on. However, we decided to differ. We decided to agree to differ without any mediation. I am very happy to say that our performance was a record-breaking performance in quarter 3, by which I mean a record-breaking EBITDA in quarter 3. Let me first start with Police and Tarnów, where we reported a record-breaking EBITDA in the history of those both companies, which translates obviously to a record-breaking EBITDA at Grupa Azoty. We have never reported such EBITDA levels in our history. But as you could see in the previous slide, quarter 3 at Grupa Azoty saw a substantially higher EBITDA than in the previous corresponding period. We closed quarter 3 with the revenue at more than 7 billion PLN, with EBITDA margin reaching 14% and EBITDA itself at 969 million PLN, higher by considerably higher year on year. Our net result, our net profit, came in at 453 million PLN. This is a very good result, especially considering the big picture, the market situation. A lot of our competitors have published their results already for quarter 3, and most of them have reported worse performance than in the previous year. I need to say that I have recently received congratulations from our major competitors for our performance in the first half of the year. So I'll now use this opportunity to thank them for those congratulations, and I'm very happy to say that our performance, which we will discuss today, is even better, which makes me even happier. So, the details. What has driven our performance in quarter 3? The main added value came from our plastics segment at 67 million in terms of EBITDA, which was driven by invariably high demand for plastics, and we are looking at quarter 4 which will probably be, in which our performance will probably be also very positive. Our fertilizers segment came in at 41 million in terms of EBITDA, and the chemicals segment at 11 million PLN. All in all, we have delivered a record-breaking EBITDA for the 3 quarters of the year at 255 million PLN. Let me now discuss the situation segment by segment, starting with the structure of our segments. As you can see on this slide, the share of the fertilizers is going down. This is a part of our strategy because our goal is to diversify the structure of our revenues in order to flatten the cyclical character of our business. I believe that in the next year the plastics segment will increase in terms of its value on the back of the new plant and its commissioning. And in the long term, we need to remember about our major investment, about our biggest investment today, namely Polimery Police, where the sales structure will be diversified even more. As you can see here, the highest growth was reported by the plastics segment. Let me dwell a little bit more on our raw materials and production inputs. Gas prices were higher on average by 20% year on year, and in Q3 they were even higher. The difference was even higher at nearly 22%. As you know, this is something we cannot translate directly to the prices of our products, but this is visible and quite obvious in our performance. Coal is another raw material we need to discuss. On the one hand, the price of coal is a major hurdle for us because it increases the cost of production of both steam and thermal energy. On the other hand, however, we need to say that this has been a positive driver of our performance for more than a year because there's no imports of fertilizers from Europe to Asia. As we all know, in Asia, production of fertilizers starts with gasification of coal, and thanks to high coal prices, we feel much more comfortable in terms of how we create and shape the situation in terms of the prices of nitrogen-based fertilizers. And we need to also mention about the urea, which is a main driver of the prices of our nitrogen-based fertilizers. Moving on to the next slide, you can see that the prices of urea have been rebounding for quite some time, which had a positive impact on certain other nitrogen-based fertilizers. If you can see on this particular chart, you can see DAP, benchmark and NPK prices. We are well below the price level generated over the next 5 years, and this is the gray zone, which we have mentioned time and again, so you can see quite clearly that we are catching a second breath in terms of the nitrogen-based fertilizers market. However, in the phosphate fertilizers, the situation is quite complicated. In terms of our agricultural producers, we have the information from the market which says that the production of grain is higher by more than 1 million tons. The situation is not as good as we thought, mainly due to major rainfalls during the harvest. However, in comparison with the neighboring countries, both on the east and on the west, I believe that our agricultural producers can be much more satisfied with that situation than a couple of years ago. A couple of words about the margins. We are looking at a stable level of margins with a slight upward trend, especially in terms of nitrogen-based fertilizers. And in phosphate fertilizers, we look at a flat margins or even declining margins. At the beginning of the year, we had certain limitations both in Asia and in Ukraine. We are not sure what the situation will look like in winter, but I need to emphasize that the agricultural agency in Poland starts direct payments to our farmers. This process has already started, and it's supposed to continue until the end of November or beginning of December. The advance payments will reach 70% of the direct payments value. And a couple of words about imports. We saw continuing growth in volumes for our nitrates, ammonia nitrates, growing twofold in comparison with the corresponding period of the previous year. However, the costs of gas are increasing, and there is a huge supply on the market, which we have to compete with, and we have to remember that we compete with certain entities that are not always in compliance with the law, but we are doing our best to minimize those effects. In terms of urea, the situation is quite similar to the situation observed last year. Moving on to the details of our performance. Our revenue is 1,100 million in quarter 3. And 3,800 million year to date. Our margin came in at 12% and EBITDA at nearly 450 million, down by around 10% year on year. Our sales volumes in quarter 3 went up by 6% year on year and by 3% year to date. Moving on to the chemicals segment, which represents 29% of our business, we have reported higher prices of our products and also higher prices of our raw materials. Our performance in the pigment segment was particularly good. We are still riding on the wave of considerable demand, and we have reported considerable increase both in our financial performance and in our revenue from sales. In terms of technical grade urea and melamine, our performance was also very good. Of course, we need to remember about a major driver, by which I mean the costs of gas, and also both oxo alcohols and plasticizers came in at better levels than a year before. Moving on to the segment performance, the performance segment by segment. The chemical segments represents 650 million PLN in quarter 3. Our margin, EBITDA margin, both year to date and for quarter 3 came in at 12%. And our revenue year to date came in at 1,900 million PLN and EBITDA at 231 million. And last but not least, the best of our segments in terms of growth, the plastics segment. If we look at the margins, you can see quite clearly that the differences in margins are much wider, despite an increase in the cost of our raw materials, namely benzene and phenol. Our performance in that segment is very satisfactory, and we can see no signs of a decline on that market for quarter 4. Our outlook for the next year is also quite positive. I believe that we are under no threats whatsoever in that area. In terms of the demand and our main customers, namely the automotive and textile segments, is still very good. So our situation is very stable. The demand is quite high. In terms of specific performance, the revenue of the segment came in at 352 million in quarter 3, nearly 100 million more year on year. Our net profit went up from minus 10 to 27 million. Our EBITDA margin came in at 16% year to date. As you can see, the volumes year to date are following an upward trend for polyamide and caprolactam. Polyamide, in terms of caprolactam, we still see a negative delta. However, both production and sales volumes of caprolactam were definitely higher year on year. And in terms of our financial situation, we have 1.4 billion of free funds at our disposal. Our debt came in at 608 million, and our net debt to EBITDA at 0.53, which is very low, if you ask me. So we can see quite clearly a potential for further improvement. Our situation is very safe. I will now give the floor over to Mrs. Świderek to discuss the situation at Puławy. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to discuss briefly our performance at Grupa Azoty Puławy in quarter 3. Just as my colleagues, I would like to say that our performance in quarter 3 are better in comparison with the corresponding period in the previous year. We are reporting a 12% growth, and our revenue came in at 798 million PLN for quarter 3. And you can see quite clearly that the growth in revenue year to date is at nearly 5% versus 2016, coming in at 2,579 million PLN. In terms of EBITDA, in quarter 3, it is higher versus the corresponding period in the previous year. It came in at 83 million PLN. Year to date, however, EBITDA went down, coming in at 365 million PLN. Our net profit delivered in quarter 3 was at 14 million versus 16 million last year. Year to date, however, it came in at 194, which is lower year on year. Our net profit was driven by the factors discussed by my colleagues, mainly by the imports and also by an increase in prices, in the prices of our strategic raw materials, mainly gas, whose price went up by more than 22%, representing an additional amount of 130 million PLN spent on our gas purchases and also an increase in the prices of benzene. All those figures affected our costs and were directly visible also in our net profit figure. As I said before, our EBITDA came in at 83 million PLN. Its growth versus the previous year was driven mainly by the agro segment and the chemical segment. In the agro segment, EBITDA went up to 16 million PLN, and the main drivers of that growth were increasing sales volumes, 33 million PLN, and also higher prices of our products offered in that segment. Similar factors driven our EBITDA up in the chemical segment. We are observing both a volume increase in sales and also higher prices of our products, which fueled an overall growth in EBITDA in the segment. Other segments of Grupa Azoty Puławy have an immaterial effect on our EBITDA. In terms of the segment structure, across the Grupa Azoty Group, the factors shaping our revenue segment by segment are similar to that discussed by my colleagues. You can see a noticeable increase of the chemical segment and the revenues of the chemical segment, up 18% versus the corresponding period in the previous year. However, the highest revenue was generated by the agro segment, or in other words, by the fertilizer segment, up 11% year on year, representing 451 PLN in quarter 3. The other two segments, namely the energy segment especially and other activities as well, have an immaterial effect on our revenue. However, the energy segment went up 10%, and the revenue of that segment came in at 16 million, and the other activities segment went down in quarter 3 to more than 13 million PLN. In terms of our fertilizer segment, on the one hand, we can see a noticeable growth, and the revenue for quarter 3 and also the revenue year to date versus the corresponding period in the previous year translated into higher EBITDA in quarter 3. However, year to date, we can see clearly that our EBITDA went down. In terms of volumes, I'd like to mention at that point that our performance in quarter 3 was mainly driven by higher volumes, especially for nitrates and also ammonia sulfate. However, there were certain products that had a negative impact on our performance. For instance, 12 million PLN, which was a negative effect of our certain products. The prices were higher. For instance, in the case of ammonium sulfate. However, I'd like to mention again at that point that our selling costs increased mainly due to higher prices of our strategic raw material, namely gas, which affected our performance. In quarter 3, our EBITDA margin came in at more than 13%, going up 2.5 percentage points year on year. Moving on to the chemicals segment, which had a positive EBITDA as well at Grupa Azoty Puławy. The revenue in that segment came in at 317 million, representing an increase by nearly 18% versus the corresponding period in the previous year. Year to date, we had a similar situation. Our revenue went up from 800 million PLN to 978 million PLN, which was driven both by the volume increase and also higher sales and higher prices of our products. For instance, caprolactam had a major impact on our growth of revenue, representing around 17 million PLN, and also its price changed and had a positive impact on our performance at 20 million PLN. In terms of the chemicals segment, we need to also analyze the cost side, especially higher prices of gas by around 14%, and also higher prices of benzene up by more than 5%. And the segment's EBITDA margin is also higher quarter on quarter, up by 2.6 percentage points. In terms of our financing situation, it is stable. We have more than 650 million free funds, which is based mainly on our corporate loans. All in all, our net debt came in at 596 million PLN. In general, the financing based on borrowings is rather low, and we have high own resources, which goes to show that our performance and our business is quite stable. I'd like to mention also that our investments across Grupa Azoty Puławy Group represented nearly 90 million PLN in total, including more than 52 million PLN at Grupa Azoty Puławy, and the remaining amount was spent on investments implemented by our subsidiaries. The next quarter and our performance in the next quarter will depend obviously on the prices of our strategic materials and the general situation in the agricultural market, which we have discussed before. Thank you very much. I will now give the floor over to Mr. Włodzimierz Zasadzki to discuss the performance of Police. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start with the fact that all the good news have already been communicated to you in terms of our performance at Police. However, I'd like to mention and focus on a couple of aspects of our revenue and our performance, both in quarter 3 and in the 9 months of the year. Obviously, in Police, we produce mainly and we sell mainly compound fertilizers, and the competition and the competitors, who are not always fair competitors, have certain impacts on us, especially in terms of price pressures of compound fertilizers. And despite we sell a lot in terms of sales volumes, our revenue are higher, but not as high as we could have expected if it hadn't been for the price pressures. Year to date, at Police, we are reporting record high EBITDA and net profit, which was driven to a large extent also by our cost levels, which stayed more or less flat. This is a major element, but also our good performance for the 9 months of the year were driven by the very favorable situation on the titanium white market, pigments, in other words. In terms of compound fertilizers themselves, our performance for the nine months of the year are considerably better year on year. However, quarter 3 alone is not that good, but let us not jump on the conclusions, because to a certain extent this situation is an effect of a certain sales strategy. For instance, in terms of titanium white, we are observing a certain fall in revenues in quarter 3 by approximately 8%, but if we look at the big picture, at the market, we can see that the prices are following an upward trend, so it's sometimes better to sell later than sooner. Titanium white is just one example, but we can say that the same applies to other products such as compound fertilizers. In general, in terms of compound fertilizers, quarter 3 is traditionally the worst quarter, which is driven mainly by a good situation in terms of urea, but much less favorable situation in terms of ammonia. We are still witnessing very low ammonia price levels, and the volumes of sales of ammonia in quarter 3 is definitely lower than a year before. This decline is quite clear, and is also due to the fact that ammonia prices hover at a rather low level. To a large extent, our performance at Police was driven by the situation in terms of titanium white pigments. We are observing a considerable increase in EBITDA and net profit, a practically record-breaking growth. We had a similar growth and similar performance at, I guess, around 210 or 2011. But in 2017, year to date, our EBITDA margin for titanium white was at a threefold higher level than in 2016. And in quarter 3 alone, our EBITDA margin went up twice, from 13% to 28%. I would like to draw your attention at that point also to the fact that our net debt increased, but this is due to major investments at Police, thanks to which we upgraded our ammonia production, and thereby we increased our production capacities and improved our profitability in that area, And also another major investment, desulfurization of flue gas. This was a necessary investment, and the necessary spending, we will close this investment this year. It represented a high amount of around 300 million PLN, which is reflected in our net debt figures. Thank you very much. Thank you. We will now give the floor over to Mr. Paweł Mortos to discuss the situation at Kędzierzyn. Thank you. Welcome. On behalf of all of us at Kędzierzyn, I would like to be quite brief because we know that there's not much time left. At Kędzierzyn, our situation is much better than in the previous quarter, which was a period of downtime at Kędzierzyn. We have had certain problems, but this is a lesson learned for us. We are preparing ourselves for the next season. We have a lot of work in terms of upgrades and repairs and investments. At Kędzierzyn, our major problem is an outdated, old machinery, and we are focusing on both repairs and investments to that end. If you look at our forecasts and at our performance today, you can see quite clearly that you do not have any spectacular investments. What we are focusing on is we are trying to improve our efficiency and to utilize our assets as good as we can. In terms of our performance, in terms of our revenue, in quarter 3 and year to date, we can see that our revenue came in at 444 million versus 379 in the previous period, up by 65 million. And year to date, we are reporting 1,324 million, which represents an upward trend by 93 million. In terms of our EBITDA margin, we are reporting 61 million in quarter 3 versus 18 in the previous year, and 173 million versus 161 million year to date. As I said before, quarter 2 was our downtime period, which is directly reflected in our sales volumes and in our production volumes, and by extension, a downward trend in our OXO segment, and automatically our sales in quarter 3 was lower, also in the fertilizer segment. However, year to date, our performance is better and looks more optimistic, and we are more optimistic about it. Our net profit in quarter 3 came in at 24 million PLN versus the loss of 3 million PLN in the previous year. Our EBITDA margin came in at 13.7% versus 4.8% in the previous quarter. In terms of our segments, as you can see, we are the first company in the Grupa Azoty Group where fertilizers do not represent the highest share of our sales. Why is that? On the one hand, we have an improved profitability figure in terms of our sales in the OXO segment, and we're also focusing very much on our sales structure. We are focusing on the customer service on an ongoing basis. We want to opt out of the sales based on intermediaries. We are creating and developing our own sales channels. We are recruiting sales representatives. We are analyzing cooperation and the potential cooperation in different countries than before. We have a certain new approach on how our products should be sold and where it should be sold. And our work in that area is very intensive and has been very intensive. And therefore, you can see a quite visible improvement in our profitability. Our trends, general trends in terms of fertilizers are similar as in the group. On the one hand, we have an increase in the price of raw materials, and on the other hand, we have the question or the problem of unfair competition. I have discussed it before. At the Group, we are very much focused on the education in the market. In Q3, we worked very intensively on how we can improve our profitability both for individual products and in terms of distributors. The group of distributors is very much differentiated. Certain distributors are very loyal, others not that much. We are looking at the situation, we are analyzing certain measures to be taken and also certain legal measures to be taken. We want to focus on improving the quality of our sales. We want to focus very much on the quality of our customer service. All in all, our situation at Kędzierzyn is quite interesting. We are reporting a 36% increase in revenues for OXO alcohols. Our performance by segment is as follows. Let me start with OXO alcohols. We are reporting 57 million PLN in revenue and an increase in EBITDA margin by 25%. As I said before, in terms of the volume, the increase is not that high. However, despite the increase in raw materials prices, we managed to report an increase in profitability. We do hope to continue that trend in the next period. We want to focus on cooperation with our customers. We want to focus on the quality of our customer service. If it hadn't been for our production problems, we would be definitely able to sell additional volume of our products in the market. Unlike our fertilizer segment, where we use internal distribution channels, in OXO alcohols we have a certain margin and certain other measures that we can take. However, we do know that each market is different, and we need to remember that. We need to take a very cautious approach in that respect. In terms of the performance, our performance in the fertilizer segment, we're reporting revenue in Q3 2017 at 199 million PLN, up by 3 million. Our EBITDA came in at 23 million PLN, up by 11 million, or 12%. In terms of OXO alcohols, our revenue came in at 260 million, up by 57 million, EBITDA at 23 million, versus the loss reported in the previous period, up by 25 million. Year to date, in fertilizers, we're reporting 620 million. In the OXO alcohol, 617 million. We have a both positive and negative effect of economic growth in Poland, because, as you know very well, we are observing an economic growth and a GDP growth in Poland. We have had certain problems in terms of logistics. To put it quite simply, we lack vehicles and the road transport. We also have not enough drivers, so we can unfortunately say that we have lots of products in store, we're not able to deliver it. This does not mean that we are losing those sales opportunities. We will move the sales to the next period. We do not lose any market share. We are improving our sales profitability. We are streamlining, we're improving the approach to prices of our products in order to remain competitive. We are looking at our competitors. We want to make sure that our competitors are fair at all levels. In terms of our financing structure in this period, in Q3, the company is opting out of borrowings. We want to use intra-group borrowings. As you remember, our debt went up, coming in at 256 million PLN, and the net debt to EBITDA ratio at 1.4. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I would like to say thank you to all the participants at the Warsaw Stock Exchange, but also to all our webcast viewers who were with us live. I would like to thank you for your patience and for your involvement, and I hope that your comments and your conclusions after this conference will be on a positive note. I would like to thank you very much for your participation live on the internet. Thank you very much and goodbye.